Hello ladies and gentlemen, this one's going to be about global warming. So here's my thing. I haven't been able to find all of the said world-class impactors that would have needed to have impacted our planet in order to have activated the lithostream scores. And I just sent a letter off to someone, or a message off to someone yesterday. This should be in their line of business to an extent. So, as it turns out, I mentioned to this entity that there are only two things that will activate the vortices on our planet at the crustal level, and maybe even activate the lithostream scores. Global warming. Yeah, figure that, right? And asteroid impacts. So this is going to explain why I can't find all of those mystery asteroid impacts that I would need to find as triggers for the lithostream scores, or the Jupiterian stripes, and the vortical rotations that I'd find. And the reason I can't, I'm having difficulty concentrating because Doodle is demanding my attention right now. So basically what it boils to, stop Doodle, what it boils down to is global warming. Long story short, global warming is far more dangerous and far more devastating to us as humanity on this planet than a 56.6 kilometer diameter rock from outer space. The funny thing about the rocks from outer space, they can wallop us, okay? And they might cause, asthenospheric tsunamis, even small ones as much. Doodle, please. Small ones as much as what we see right here, extending out from the impact right about right here. Okay? They happen. They hit us hard. We get our tsunamis, our asthenospheric tsunamis, and life goes back to normal-ish. Not unless you get something like the South China Sea impactor. Okay, so here's the difference, right? This guy here, North Pacific Oceanic Impactor, I'm calling him a world class. This one over here, I decided to up to a galactic class because of the severity of the damage from its magnitude that it caused on the surface of our planet. And it even bothered it, and that's the kind of thing that we're looking at for. My bad, sorry, I don't know what to do. She's a bird. Alright, so anyway, this is worse than I thought. So basically, in that you have a tsunami that started right up here at basically the Earth's, what was once the Earth's, well, still the Earth's planetary suture. It went all the way down here, went around Australia, came down here, and ended up going all the way down to South Pole. Okay, on this side, I realized that all of that tsunami meltdown had a lot of activity going on over here as well, from this side of the coast to this side of the coast. And it just dawned on me yesterday that it came down through here. The Aleutian Island tsunami came through here, whipped up here, and at the same time, this one was coming down through here. I forget the name of it. And this splashed up over here. Yeah, that's right, splashed up. What made these mountains? Well, it didn't splash like water splashes in a bathtub. Doodle, please. Quit screaming. I'm talking. This is my bird time. All right. So, she's probably hungry. She's always hungry. She's eating right now. Well, anyway, she doesn't like those little bird crunchy nuggets that aren't seeds. She loves the seeds. We're trying to change her diet, and she really doesn't. She's not buying into that. Okay, back to the story. Here's the thing, right? What's this? What is this compared to in something small? Small things that happen on Earth are repeated in large things. So what we have that's small, that's relative to the formation of this ground right here, are the So the ice over the Great Lakes started to melt down and break up, and the waves from the weather were pushing the ice off to the shorelines. And as the ice reached the shore, it started climbing up onto the shore. And as it was kind of making that sound, crushing ice, right? Because it was crushing the ice and building it up, and then the ice was really jagged on the top, and it just kept climbing up right up to people's sliding glass doors. Freaky! They were scared. They filmed it. If you can Google it. That's what you get here. That's how a lot of these mountains came into being. That's exactly how the Himalayas became the Himalayas. All right, from all that stuff going and getting crammed up. All right, now that we covered that, that's what we're talking about in terms of catastrophic. And it took a galactic class, as we will say, than the South China Sea impactor to create that kind of meltdown. On the other hand, you have the world impactors that, you know, they can definitely agitate the lithosphere, but they don't really create any asthenospheric tsunamis. No, at least not that cover an entire hemisphere of the planet. So if you look at those tsunamis as I've traced them and mapped them out, you will see that it is one entire hemisphere of our planet that is covered in tsunamis. They're not everywhere. It's only central and focused on that impact site, and created the ring of fire. Imagine that, right? Okay, here's the other thing, right? I'm saying there had to be 4 world-class impactors. That was my thing to go with. I can only show you 3. 2 world-class and 1 galactic class. I can show you the North Pacific Oceanic impactor, the Wakana Yabo impactor in right there, and then I can show you the South China Sea impactor as being the most largest, and this one wasn't the largest. This was smaller than the other 2, but it had a whop to it. It had a much greater magnitude. Don't ask me why it had such a great magnitude. That part I can't tell you, unless it was carrying a nuke. All right, yeah, hopefully that's not the case. I mean, somebody would have had to have shot it at us. Okay, so now we're coming over here, right? And we have this stuff. We have this vortex is rotating counterclockwise. That's why the little spirals are going this way. And this vortex, what we have today, is rotating in the exact opposite direction. That's not very far between those two, ladies and gentlemen. That means that as the equator is above, I believe that's where it is. Let me look. I have to verify so I'm not putting out bad poop, because I do put out bad poop on occasion because I get mixed up. And it's not intentional. I'm thinking the right thing. I just don't say the right thing, right? So we're going to go grid. Yep, it's under the equator. All right, so now I'm going to shut that grid off. And here it is. I'm trying to hurry because I have to go to work here in a minute. All right, so this is below the equator. In order for this to have been rotating over here in the exact opposite direction, the equator would have had to have been below that vortex. Here's why it's not the North Pole. North Pole vortices rotate in the opposite direction of the planetary rotation, period. So that eliminates this vortex as having possibly been the North Pole at one time. It is not the South Pole. Why? Because it is not cyclonic. So here's what I tried to mention before. Okay, when you end up with spiraling land masses, if we get right down into here, you have a cyclonic vortex. That means the vortex is sucking material out away from the core, well in this case, out away from the core and pooping it out the end. I was thinking the North Pole was also the same as the South Pole. I don't think I'm correct about that anymore because there's no evidence to suggest there's any kind of spiraling arms. Spiraling arms are only in the southern hemisphere. That tells us something. The planet poops from the bottom only and not out the top. So basically, like a friend said at work, he's like, so what you're saying is the planet is like a living being. It has a mouth and it has a butt. And I'm like, right, it has like actually 5 mouths and 1 butt. So the North Pole is actually not cyclonic, but also anticyclonic. It's sucking material in from outside and pushing it down toward the core. Totally changes my whole mantle convection operational theory. So now everything is going through its boiling sequence, but it's boiling down. It's all being pushed down to the butt of the planet and then recycled back up. Yeah. So, and around all the equatorial vortices, right? So basically you have at least 3 cyclonic vortices. Fiji Island is a cyclonic vortex. New Zealand is a cyclonic vortex. And then you have Antarctica, which is also a cyclonic vortex. All right. Now, in order to get these 2 guys to jump and flip, in other words, flipping vortices so close to each other, that means, ladies and gentlemen, that the North Pole would have been somewhere over here, but the equator was below this guy, and that's why it was rotating, because it got closer to the North Polar Vortex, which is the driving force for this direction of a vortex on the equator. Okay? Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that something happened to have caused this. These Jupiterian scores here may or may not be related to this particular vortex, but they probably are. And I might have mapped them incorrectly, which should put this somewhere above the equator, not below the equator. Currently, these scores that I mapped did not turn out in such a way to place this vortex above the equator, but actually well below the equator. So they may or may not, that's what I'm saying, they may or may not be related to that particular event. And they may or may not necessarily be related. They're definitely not related to the Guacanayabo. That one has the funky oval shape scores that basically make the planet appear to have had gone into this after it got clobbered. They don't have anything to do with this guy up here, because this guy's scores are pretty much right on line with, well, basically right in line with our current North Pole orientation, just off slightly, barely off. So that means currently I don't really have a huge impactor that would have activated this vortex at the time that the vortex was in this location beneath the surface. So what does that mean? That means something else to do. Global warming. And that's what I was telling the Office of Planetary Defense, by the way. Okay, so there's only 2 things that are going to make this happen. Here's the frightening thing. Global warming is more dangerous. Do I have any time left? I have less than a minute. Global warming is more dangerous than a 56.6 kilometer asteroid that clobbers us from outer space once every billion years. Why? Because we get clobbered, bam, happens, and then the Earth gets back to normal. Hopefully. I mean, unless it throws the whole planet into, like this, into a global ice age once again or something, right? But in this instance, global warming heats the Earth up, like taking the Earth to the gym or the sauna, okay? And it swells because it's getting hotter. It's thinning the skin. Doodle! It's thinning the skin like this. Doodle's really upset. And, all right, and as it thins the skin, of course, the vortices that are always active underneath begin to become more active on the crustal layer of the surface of our planet. And that's when you start to see major changes in continental formation. And these, like you have right here. Notice how Africa, all this right here, this piece of India was actually blended into our current vortices, right? Their perimeters come right up into here. That explains India. Okay, but before India was pulled down it started to get chewed up down into the blender, you had this blender sending a lot of material off this way, which is what gives you South Africa's horn, right? So, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Global warming at its best work right there, probably. And it ended up causing so much of the Earth to move around so quickly, geologically speaking, or maybe even real time speaking, that it caused enough of the continental mass to migrate to the point that it did shift the polar orientation of our planet because of the weight distribution of the continental masses. So I'm going back on my thing. Well, the North Pole orientation doesn't just change dramatically. Well, if the world gets hot enough and enters into a state of worldwide liquefaction enough to speed up the process of rotation, we could watch our North Pole orientation shift. So you might see San Francisco, California, that section of California all the way down to Baja get severed from the North American continent, pushed, well, from your point of view, pushed up north and toward the east, right? Going westward, but it's going westward toward the eastern side of the eastern hemisphere. And then if we have a flip in vortices and directional rotation, then that might come back down. You might be watching those guys come back down and watch California reconnect down here and or clobber the planet. Who knows, right? At that point, because your vertical orientations are going to be shifting, and when they shift, that means different parts of the planet are going to be spinning. You see what I'm saying? So flipping vortices, not something we want to see in the future. However, if we keep heating up our planet and cooking it like we are, that's exactly what we're going to see. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead in one of these videos, and I'm going to start talking about it, just exactly what might happen and which continents might begin to go where under our current vertical rotations. And then, well, it might be a little hard to determine exactly how, well, if I can, in my mind, balance out the weight load and the distribution of our planet in terms of the continental masses, I might actually be able to tell us where the North Pole orientation could be redirected to. It just depends. All right, that's it. I gotta go. There it is.